And I wanted to change that completely. I wanted to change the paradigm into 3.5-minute multi-influence pop songs that were the best that they could possibly be. So that's what I'm still trying to do, but you know, you don't have that inspiration of being somebody who feels like they're in a field of one. That was like the driving force, and my driving force was breaking into the music industry, which I knew nothing about. I wasn't in touring bands like a lot of people think, oh, you were playing in pubs with bands that failed. No, I wasn't. I was living in the suburbs and had no career, no stagecraft, nothing.
Outside of London?
I was in Surrey, county of Surrey, in a village called Deepcut, very small village. So that was, you know, so it was deeply inspiring for me then, because I was breaking into the industry, or trying to, and I thought I would, and I you know, really had grandiose ideas about myself, really, you know, because there was nobody doing this then. And I thought, you know, I'm going to be the new Dylan maybe, or the next, you know, Van Morrison and all this. In fact, the first article that came out of me in Sounds magazine, the caption was, could this be the new Bob Dylan? It's like, wow, kiss of death there right away. I thought, yeah, this guy's getting it right. You came all the way from Chicago. You thought, Jesus.
In the rain.
Yeah, well done, man. Me too.
Graham, I see that you're going to be doing a couple shows a little later on in October with Nick Lowe, who produced your debut album,
yes.
Howling Wind. How well do you still know Nick, and how did you first meet him? And he's responsible for working with you on some of the really important early stuff.
Yeah, he did my first album and the third album, actually. Well, you see, again, I didn't know who the band Brinsley Schwarz was, and he was in a band called Brinsley Schwarz. But by a series of events, I put an ad in a Melody Maker music paper in England. I just cold sent an ad in. There's this guy in Surrey nobody knows, and I sent an ad. I put an ad in there for musicians, wanted musicians, you know, into the bands, the Stones, Dylan. I didn't know what else to put. That was the closest kind of reference point to what I was doing. And lots of really useless people answered the advert, apart from one guy in London named Noel Brown. And I drove up to London and met this guy, and he was this kind of august Dickensian figure almost. And he played lap steel guitar and Telecaster, and he was sort of rockabilly. And I had this song, Back to School Days, which, you know, this was in '74, a few years before my career began. And another song called Soul Shoes, and he loved the songs. He thought, he just played along with them. This guy was the only musician I played with who got it, because everyone else was still playing minor chords and playing 8 15-minute songs, you know, at that time. Nobody else was doing this. He introduced me to a guy who introduced me to another guy. This other guy was Dave Robinson, who was a manager of this band Brinsley Schwarz, involved with something that was called pub rock, which I knew nothing about, apart from I went to see in '75 a band called Dr. Feelgood, who apparently had something to do with this pub rock thing, you know. And I saw them in the suburbs in a theatre with another band called Kokomo, who were a soul-driven act. So I realized, wait a minute, there is this kind of music going on, sort of. But nobody's writing like I am. Nobody's this good. I know it, you know. So I had that thing going for myself. Dr. Feelgood were basically an R&B revival band, you know. They were pretty much. But the thing is, they were punk before punk happened in England, because they had suits, short hair, and they were angry. All the other bands are hippie bands, like, you know, you tune up and you sort of apologize for things, you know. They didn't apologize. They went out and was like, up yours. You know, it was like, whoa. 1975 this is going on, you know. They were probably going before then. So I kind of got a glimpse of that, and this guy, Dave Robinson, brought these musicians around me. He recognized my talent and brought around these musicians that were from all these different bands that had broken up because they couldn't get anywhere. And they were these alleged pub rock bands, because the reason they were called that was because they played in pubs and they couldn't get any further. That was it. They couldn't make it in any other way. So when I was rehearsing with these musicians, who I realized were very good, Brinsley Schwarz, Bob Andrews was the keyboard player, a guy named Martin Belmont, who'd been in another failed pub rock band called Ducks Deluxe, and Andrew on the bass and Steve on drums, who were in a band called Bon Ton Roulette, who had just done a few gigs. They'd all broken up, they joined together, they were kind of jamming together, and Dave Robinson said, I found the guy for you, you've got to back this guy. He's really something, this guy's the new thing, you know. And so I was rehearsing with these great musicians, not knowing who they were, and then he said, I think we should get Nick Lowe to produce you. And I'm like, who's he? You know, and he said, well, he's in this band, he was in Brinsley Schwartz. I said, I don't know any, what did I know? I knew nothing. I was completely green, so, okay. So he came down and listened to the stuff and turned out to be the producer of my first album. That's the way it went.
So cool.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on record labels these days? You've been in Bloodshot Records for a while now. This is your fourth album for the label. I mean, you very famously began on Mercury Records. Apparently things didn't go too well with Mercury. You recorded the infamous, Mercury poisoning single as after you left the label to go to Arista. You went from Arista to Elektra to Atlantic to Capitol to RCA.
Really?
Yeah, you've been all over the place. So how many people are aspiring musicians here tonight? Raise your hands. How many people are singer-songwriters? How many people play live? Anybody here? A few people? I mean, do you recommend that folks even pursue trying to get signed to any type of label?
Well, I think there are small labels around. Don't bother with the indies, with the majors, unless you fit into that category of music, which is, generally a kind of the high-end glossy pop music or whatever's going around, which I'm not disparaging, but that's what it is. That's what they deal with now, and they're pretty honest about it, for the most part, when I started, basically another interesting thing happened. A DJ who had a show on London radio, which I'd never heard because I was in the suburbs, you couldn't pick it up, played two of my demos. Dave Robinson, my manager, knew him, and gave it to this guy, Charlie Gillette. And he played two songs of mine, and a guy from Phonogram Records called up and said, who's that guy who sounds a bit like Van Morrison, a bit like Bob Dylan? I want to sign him. And boom, from literally nowhere, I had a crack band and a record deal out of nowhere. And so the American side of that was Mercury. And so Mercury picked up the record, and we came to America the first year of my career and toured in the station wagon, because my manager was like, we've got to get to America. We've got to get there before there's other people like you, Graham. You're the one, we've got to get there, We've got to be the first people. Before music like this starts. He had a vision that the progressive music was going to drop, and this kind of singer-songwriter with angst was going to, and he was right, actually, as it turned out, But, I said, great, let's go. And so we went to America. Mercury just turned out to be run by a lot of guys who were in their 40s, which seemed incredibly old to me then, Basically, they had a back catalogue of, Rod Stewart or whatever, and they were quite content to sell compilation albums. They did not know what to do with my music. There was nothing called new wave or punk or, anything like that. So in '76, there was no outlet for what I was doing. So they didn't promote it. They just thought, we don't know what to do with this. So they did very little. They did not support us very much. So really, it was my manager was tearing his hair out, realizing that this was not going to go well, I was amazed. Here I'm in America. What the hell? How did that happen? It's just incredible. I'm in Memphis. Playing in clubs. I'm opening for the first gig in America. Was opening for Sonny Terry Brownie McGee, who I'd seen in England, because in England you always go through a phase of loving the blues, because the Europeans really took blues, we protected blues music, whereas America was ignoring it, really. All those guys, Champion Jack Dupree and all those acts, would come to England and earn a living, and they'd play in France and be heroes, 70-year-old black guys who couldn't get arrested in America, And so we all had a founding in blues, John Mayall's Blues Breakers and all that. And, I was a big fan of Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac and Chicken Shack and those groups. So there I was in America. I opened for, I think it was Freddie King somewhere in the middle, in the deep south. I'm like, it's just, so it was all amazing to me. But my manager was tearing his hair out, with Mercury. So it was more, him than me.